So let's talk about Tales of Kenzara. So this was a fun game, short game. It was nice and sweet. It had everything that this type of game you would expect, right? And I enjoyed it quite a bit. What's going on, everyone? Going on, everyone? Hello, my name is Ben Smith, and today we're going to be talking about Tales of Kenzara ZAU, if I'm pronouncing that right. I played this game in its entirety a few weeks ago, probably a month ago at this point, and this game was it was a narrative, and I really enjoyed that. I think it's been a while since I played a game that had a story to tell, right? And you go through it's a beginning, middle, end, like it was a whole thing. But essentially, what this game is it's like a Metroidvania esque game. I would say there are some parts that are very much reminiscent of that, but it's kind of a Metroidvania light, if you would. Now, just a forewarning: this video will have a couple of spoilers in it. I'm just going to be talking freely about the game. If you haven't seen the entirety of the playthrough, or if you would like to see that running in the background while you're doing something else, maybe, I'll put a link to that in the description below. But essentially, for the rest of this video, I'm going to be referring to the game as ZAU, which is also the main character of the story. Now, the game was fun. It was juicy. It was nice to play. Great story. I love the accents. That's just me being weird, but I love the accents. And it was a good time. It was a good time. I beat it in one day, so it took about, I would say 10 hours to beat. Now, if you've watched my video before, I am very upset about this. I did the whole, not last act, but like the third act, the third level, if you would, of this game, just didn't record. I was recording the whole time. I took a break to go get some dinner or something, and then it's all gone. So I'm really pissed about that, but I can talk through that part as we watch the gameplay in the background here. But what was the game, right? How did it feel to play? Now, overall, the game is a side scroller. There's a lot of platforming, which in my opinion was the hardest freaking part to do, was the platformer. So you're going along, you're platforming, you're jumping over spikes and all that stuff, and then there's a combat section in it, which part of me feels like it didn't get too much attention in terms of, like, if they had to cut corners somewhere, it would have been somewhat the combat, because everything else was fleshed out a lot better. But like, that's just like making it sound like the combat was bad. The combat was good. It was good for what it was. It did the job very well, and I can talk a little bit more on that later. But the main character ZAU, it's a story about you going through, or the main character going through the passing of his father, and the emotions involved with that, and that's kind of, this whole story is an analogy between the main character, like, and the story that his dad wrote, which is what you're playing, is that story. And it's just a big analogy of, like, you gotta conquer your emotions, you gotta essentially accept that he's gone, and all that very touching stuff. I didn't tear up at all, but the game was emotional in that endearing kind of sense of the word, to where, the story was good. It wasn't like, it didn't feel forced. They weren't doing anything to where it's like, oh, that's cheesy. No, it was a great story. And they gave you the opportunity to play through it instead of like watch it like, this could have been a very much a one of those nominee award-winning short films, but they made it a game instead. And I remember seeing the dude up on stage when he what was it, the game show awards or whatever, when he brought this out, and he was very personal to him. So it's I'm happy that I was able to play through this game. But anywho, moving on. The game, very much a story beat. You're very much into getting through the story. At least that's how I was. I was invested in the story to the point to where the stuff that would be quote unquote boring weren't. Uh, there are some extra stuff that you can do outside of this theme park style going through the story nonsense, um, which thankfully enough, and what I really appreciated was it wasn't too far out of the way, right? All the extra stuff, there was extra stuff, but they told you where everything was for the most part. You didn't have to do a lot of guessing. You didn't have to rummage around like forever trying to find, like trying to 100% the game. Everything was where like close enough to where if you were observant enough, as for the most part I was throughout the playthrough, it was you were able to get all the stuff, right? You might have to do a little bit of backtracking, but nothing too crazy. Especially for a side-scrolling game where, you know, they only had like a couple of teleporting spots in the game, right? So that was a really nice touch in the game. It wasn't too long, right? It wasn't painfully longer than it needed to be. But essentially, going into like the combat, let's just talk about that. Getting used to it was fairly intuitive. I picked up on it pretty quick. But it's an easy to do, hard to master kind of thing. In the beginning of the game, I was switching back and forth between the two fighting modes you have, which is like the sun and the moon. The sun being more aggressive and like hand to hand or close quarters, and the moon being, while it had some close quarter stuff, it was more of a range based combat. And switching between the two was very satisfying to do, very quick and easy. And you can really get some good combos off there, which I enjoyed doing, as you see throughout the gameplay as I get into combat scenarios. Now, as you progress further into the game, I was very much, I have this thing to where I don't use my ability points until I start losing ridiculously. So throughout most of the game, I would say a good 80% of the game, I didn't upgrade a single thing in the combat tree. Not a single thing. And unfortunately, the time that I did upgrade everything, that's the time that it didn't record. So that was in the third act. I upgraded everything. And just speaking on like, once everything is upgraded all the way, combat gets a lot easier to do, to the point to where it's like kind of easy, bro. Like you can really knock things out if you know what you're doing. If you've been using or been doing the combat well and you're used to it, you can clear the map. You can clear the whole battlefield, especially if you use there's ultimate abilities that you can use. One is a Kamehameha, and the other one is Fire Tornado. Firebending. So if you just spam the firebending, like Fire Tornado, you practically win. And at that point, you got so much like points or stamina or power bar, whatever you want to call it, that you can just do that like a couple of times in a row even, and just destroy these folks. Like near end game, they weren't hard at all. It got easier because I got stronger, because I actually upgraded my crap. Probably could have got it easier a lot sooner, but that's just me. So the combat itself was nice. It was nice. I have no complaints. And there was a couple of like challenges that you can do to where it was just pure combat and you're just fighting. Now that I think on those combats, I do have a couple of complaints. And it's not anything wrong with the game. It's just that I was annoyed by the flying enemies. The flying enemies are oftentimes hard to reach, especially if later in the game they make the combat a little more interesting by them only taking damage or only able to get hurt by the certain stance that you're in, whether that be the sun or the moon. And then the other stance that it is just highly resistant to damage. You can barely do anything to it. So having a flying enemy that doesn't want to get close enough for you to hit it, and is also blue or resistant to the moon, you have to get close to it in order to do damage. So you can't, like, it's just struggling with that mechanic, trying to get close to that damn thing, and it's flying away. Very annoying. But that's kind of the biggest gripe that I had with the combat. Really, I think everything else was pretty cut and dry. Especially once you unlocked everything, it wasn't really all that bad. Nothing to snuff at. It's a great way for you to test your ability later on, especially if you did what I did and you didn't level anything up or anything like that. It's very fun to see the interesting ways that you can go about taking the enemies out. But that was the combat system overall. A good combat system for the game that it was, or that it is. It was good. The range combat with the ranged enemies did a good job. They did their best when it comes to the variety of enemies. The variety of enemies were, for the amount of time that you spend in the game, appropriate. If I were to say anything on an improvement, I guess introducing more, like one or two more variants of enemies, or a couple of more, just to spruce things up a little bit in terms of the combat side of the house. But enough of the combat. Moving on, let's talk about the general feel of the exploration. Now, it's been a while since I played a 2D platformer, but this one it wasn't hard to get into. Everything was kind of, it makes sense. You have a dash ability and a double jump that you can take advantage of to get around. And as the game goes on, you unlock more abilities like whip and, a gliding ability and things of that nature. But the traversal was very fluid. I was very surprised, actually, in the beginning, how fluid it was and how easy it felt. Now, as the game went on, it wasn't as easy as I initially thought. I was like, man, I'm just owning this game. And then there was like a particular section. Holy crap. I kept dying. It's just like a small little hallway and the floor was spiked. So you have to just jump in a particular way or time it right and then dash and you'd make it through it. But it was a very close freaking fit. So either I think both the roof and the floor was spikes. And you touch it once, you're freaking Mega Man. You blow up. So timing that right was that was the hardest part of the game to me. Like, thinking back, that was the hardest part of the game. Like, the bosses, I died a couple of times on them, but that was the hardest part, is getting past the dang platforming. So, like, the platforming sections, in my opinion, some of them, not all of it, some of it was easy, but some of it was very difficult, to the point to where I was surprised how difficult it had become. But it was a good time, nonetheless. Frustrating at times, but it was, again, fluid. You can get through it. You just, if you make a mistake, that's fine. You can start over. There was nothing too damning to where you miss a jump and you have to start all the way over from the beginning type thing, and then you're frustrated because you have to start all the way over. There was rarely anything like that. Which gets into the other part of the exploration of the world, was the puzzles. Now, in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, I've been playing video games for a while, I guess, so I have this acuity for it, but the puzzles were simple, not at all difficult. Some of the puzzles I solved without even actually solving the puzzle the game intended me to. I was like, you could push around some blocks in order to get them on pressure plates and use some of your abilities to hit certain items there to get things to work. And there was one puzzle in particular I did about twice in the game, to where I solved the puzzle and I was like, what is this block doing here? I didn't need it. I just double jumped, I double jumped, did an attack, dashed, and that was enough to get me over to the other side. But the game has intended for me to, like, push the block, get it pushed up by air, push the block again, like, it intended me to actually do a whole puzzle, and it straight up, it wasn't necessary. So, and that is to say that the whole, like, puzzles stuff that you had to do in the game, by and large, very simple. Some of it even brain dead, to the point it was like, can't wait to get to the next part. It's just time consuming. You already know what you have to do from the moment you look at it. At least that was my experience. The moment that I looked at it, I was like, I know exactly what I have to do. I just have to go and do it, and that's what took the time. But yeah, it was a overall it was okay. It was what you'd expect from the game. You can't not have puzzles. You know what I mean? So like the puzzles were fine. It just made the game progress the way that it was supposed to. I guess if you put it that way. So yeah, no real complaints there. If the puzzles were a little more challenging, a little more compact, because some of the puzzles like lasted quite a bit, and that's kind of the game in a nutshell. Those puzzles, so like I get why they're extended out to the length that they were, but was that the funnest part of the game to me? No, the funnest part of the game to me was either the combat to a certain extent, or just going through the story. It was fully voice acted. Again, I love the accents, the African like accents that they have. I was speaking in that accent for about a week, and the people that are around me were very annoyed by that. But I enjoyed the story the most. This is definitely one of those games that you play for the story. Now, getting into that, the story, what was that about? I don't necessarily want to get into too much detail about what the story was, but essentially, the main character, his dad dies, and his dad, before he died, he wrote a story, because he used to write books all the time, right? So he writes this story, and the mom gives it to the son, and she says, "Your dad made this for you." So he reads it, and that's how you start the game. You're a spirit, a shaman, and your father in the story, the father of the main character, also dies, and your name is ZAU. So ZAU reaches out to the god of death, right? And he summons the god of death and creates a deal with the god of death, saying there are three great spirits in the land. He's like, hey, I'm gonna do the whatever task to take care of the three great spirits and like shaman the shit out of them, right? And in return, you're gonna return my father back to life. And he accepts, for him to do the task or whatever. It's a known task amongst the shamans or what have you. So he's going about that, and that's kind of how the story gets rolling. And a lot of the story turns into like the god of death, his name is Kalunga. So ZAU and Kalunga, they're going back and forth, and they're not necessarily banter, but like the conversations they have throughout the story. They're kind of the two main characters throughout the entirety of the game. And there's some other characters that you run into, a little girl and another shaman, kind of. And I say kind of because he was like not really a shaman, or she died or something. I don't actually really know if that was actually a person or not. But like, yeah, there's some other characters that you run into, and it's just the story is more or less just ZAU like processing his emotions as he goes throughout this his experience with death through his father, and like him and his conversations with Kalunga, the god of death, is somewhat turbulent because Kalunga is responsible for his father dying. He like takes the souls and he takes them over to the other lands, whatever African religion, the other land place, death. They're dead. He guides the souls to the afterlife. So they work together sometimes because Kalunga is like kind of guiding ZAU through the trials, but at the same time ZAU is like, he doesn't like him because he killed his father. Essentially, he took his father away. So it makes for some very interesting and pensive dialogue, and I found that very engaging. As a enjoyer of story, it was great. It made for great storytelling. There's a lot of times where ZAU was being an adolescent punk and just being a fool, but going through this time as a processing the death of his father and all that, it's understandable. He wasn't over the board all of the time, annoying. Still very much a likable character. So that was great. That was like the main juice of the game, and the acts are kind of split up. The areas of the game, the acts, the levels, whatever you want to call them, they were split up in more or less the spirits that you had to, the great spirits that you had to, like, I don't know, exercise I guess is the word for it, but that's the shaman's duty, is to exercise or pass the spirits on to the next world, because the spirits, they, kind of like ghosts, they don't want to move on, or there's something that's keeping them in the world, and they have to be passed on. The shaman helps them do that. So those are the three main areas that you have to go through, getting all the way up to they're the bosses. You fight them as the boss and you defeat them. The first one being more or less straightforward. I died on the bird boss quite a bit. It was like a bird spirit boss thing, the god of storms or whatever. You defeat her. The second one being kind of it caught you off guard. It was not necessarily, you're there to defeat them, and they all had very interesting African names that I'm not going to remember. You're there to defeat them, and then it was the god of fear or something like that, and it was a very interesting and annoying level, because you're getting chased by the fog of fear, and ZAU's like scared shitless, and like I kept fucking dying, and that was very annoying. But that boss was not necessary. It was like a minion mosh pit rather than a boss, and that was kind of underwhelming in that sense. And then the third and final boss, the act that you guys didn't get to see, just to brush over that a little bit, you go to the desert area and you meet a shaman whose son, like, the volcano erupted, and the son went off to go complete his shaman trials, even though the volcano had erupted and everyone had evacuated. So you go off to try to find the son. You end up going through the desert place turned into a volcanic. You're climbing up the volcanic mountain. And long story short, you get in there. It's like a giant monkey spirit thing. And that boss fight was very simple. It was nice. It was simple. A traditional boss fight, He was on the side of the screen. He would shoot things at you. You jump over it or whatever. And then you go beat the shit out of him. So I beat that in my first try. And turns out that the monkey spirit thing was the sun shaman, the shaman's son that you went to go find. It was the god of wrath or whatever, or rage. And the son was angry because he went up there to do his shaman trials, and what had happened was his father went up looking for him, and his father died, trying to find him. So the son finds his father, buries him, and then the son himself dies. But instead of passing on like his father did, turning into a regular spirit, he turns into a vengeful spirit that was angry with himself for getting his dad killed, essentially. And that was very touching. And then the reason why I go into detail on that bit of the story is because you can't really see it in my gameplay or my walkthrough. And again, I do apologize for that. Like, fuck. Yeah, I streamed it on YouTube, and then it suddenly didn't want to stream. Probably something on my end, like the internet dropped for a second, and I didn't check. So that's on me. But at that point, you're kind of sucked out of the story, because the real main character, not ZAU, but the main character, whatever his name actually was, finished reading it. His dad died before he can finish the story, right? So a couple of more story beats happen. You walk throughout the house. You have the option to walk throughout the entirety of his house. His mom's pregnant. They're going to have a new baby, but the dad died. And I'm just from now on, I'm going to say everything and say, but the dad died. Because, we didn't know that coming in at this point, Anywho, you go throughout that, you walk throughout the house, and it's just extra like things to talk about. Like you just go up to an item and interact with. And he's like, "Oh, I remember this painting. Oh, I remember these plush dolls and all that nonsense." So that's just an optional thing that you did. I went through all of it, and I think that part is actually recorded, which is nice. But essentially, more story beats happen. He actually goes and sees his father, like his casket, and he processes, that part of his death. And then his mom tells him to, like, some sort of inspirational words. So he decides to finish the story. So you go back into the game, right? Into playing as ZAU and Kalunga, and he's finished the trials. You've done all the trials. You've saved all of them, helped all the spirits pass on. It's time for Kalunga to uphold his half of the deal. And in order to uphold that half, you go to the spirit realm, which I thought was going to be like the final fight, like the final area. Everything would be super difficult. It was very peaceful. There was a bunch of spirits everywhere. There was a couple of platforming bits that thankfully I didn't die on. At least if I died, I only did it like once or twice, but there's a couple of platforming bits that you go through. And that's more or less that whole like area there. It was very quick. You get to the spot, like a great tree or whatever, kind of like Black Panther is a great tree, except there was no panthers on it. Anyway, that's where Kalunga was to bring his father back to life. But at the end of the story, twist, Kalunga was actually ZAU's dad the whole time. Oh, big spoiler! I told you about spoilers. That's what happened, and that's what's on the end of the game. I did capture that part. So he's the final boss, like the end of the game boss that you fight, and he was just a combination of all the bosses put together, the moves that he was using. So if you're one of those real ones, I guess, that watch the entirety of the game, you'll notice that the parts that you don't recognize from my particular playthrough are the big baboon monkey boss that I unfortunately didn't record. And then he has a couple of tricks of his own, but I beat the soup out of him after upgrading all of my stuff to 100. And essentially, I won 100%. I got a platinum on this game, platinum trophy. I'm a PlayStation guy. I got a platinum trophy on this game and destroyed it. And it was a great game. It was nice and short and simple, and it was a great story. And that's more or less what I was looking for from this game, was a story, a good story to go through. And that, outside of that, I wasn't really expecting much. I didn't know what to expect. But at the end of the day, it was a good game. And I definitely recommend it to somebody to play through, especially if you're more on the casual side, and you just want to have some little play time, and you can put it on easy mode or whatever, so it's not too difficult for you. And I definitely say that because my wife is not a gamer by any stretch of the means, but she does play video games with me, right? And sometimes some of these games are a little too hard for her, and she would still like to enjoy it, and I'm pretty sure she would. It's just that the difficulty is a little up there for her. She didn't grow up playing video games like I did. So for someone like that who's out there who would want to play a game like this, you can. It's a great game, great story. If you're emotional, you might tear up a bit because it was interesting in that game. If you don't care that you just got the whole thing spoiled and you want to go through it yourself, I definitely recommend it. Play it on easy mode, because the main beat of the story of the game is the story. All the rest of the stuff is just, in my perspective, filler. I put it on hard mode, I believe, because I wanted to challenge myself, and that was pretty much it. But there you go. That's pretty much me. That is the Tales of Kenzera ZAU. Great game. Definitely give it a shot. If you are a PlayStation player, it is free. If you have the PlayStation Plus Premium, where you have access to all of the gaming catalog and what have you, it is. I got this game, played it for free, and good game, good title. Definitely recommend to pick up. It's an easy 10 hours of gameplay, which is it's a bang for your buck, especially since you're not paying for it. It's a great time to have in terms of time efficiency, or rather time cost, right? I don't think it's a waste of time. But I appreciate you watching both videos. If you watch the video in any capacity of my playthrough, and again, I'll leave a link in the description below. Thank you for watching this video, and leave a like if you liked it. If you didn't like it, you know, you can dislike it, please. I like the feedback. Any feedback is good. Tell me why, what I can do to improve in the comments. Or if you've played the game, what did you feel about it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it annoying in some capacities? Did you like the combat? Anything like that. I would love to talk with you about it, because it was a good game in my opinion. But there are a couple of things that, you know, I did leave out, like the nuances and so on and so forth. I would love to have a conversation. But with all that said, yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe. It would really mean the world to me if you did subscribe. I'd appreciate it a lot. But y'all have a good one. Vince out.